Hello students, standard 8. Chapter 12 revision is going on, friction, in which we learn about what is friction, cause of the friction. Also we learn that the friction depends which factors are affecting friction, when the friction is more, when the friction is less, etc. Now, there are different types of frictions also. First of all is the static friction. Now, when an object is at rest, like a table or a chair, etc. If we want to keep it in motion, means from rest we want to move it, then we need to apply the force which can overcome the friction. Because we know that there is a friction between the two surfaces because of that irregularities on the surface. So in this situation, if you want to move that object from rest, we need to apply the force which is more than that friction. And that friction is known as static friction. That is the measure of static friction. The force required to overcome friction at the instant an object starts moving from rest is a measure of static friction. It means that if you talk in simple, that the force required to make the object moving from rest, that measure of that friction is known as, force is known as the static friction. Because we have to overcome that friction. So that is the static friction. Then the other friction is the sliding friction. Sliding friction means once you start moving an object, for example, think about the situations. First, there is a heavy object on the floor and you're trying to move it. Therefore, you have to apply force which can overcome that friction, as I told you. Means first you have to apply the static friction. Now, once it is in motion, then to keep it in motion, same motion, then we need to apply the force. If you stop applying force, it will not move, it will stop moving. So, to keep that in motion, we have to apply the force, and that force is known as sliding friction. So sliding friction, the force required to keep an object moving with the same speed is a measure of sliding friction. So once it is in motion, then to keep it moving with the same speed, we need to apply the force, and that measure of that force is known as sliding friction. Now tell me, which is easier, to bring the object at rest to motion or keep the motion continue? Once it is in motion, then it is easier to keep it in motion. It means that sliding friction is little smaller than static friction, because to keep the motion in the same speed it is easier, but to move the object from rest and keep it in motion, that is little harder. It means that in that situation we need to apply more force. That is the static friction. So static friction is more and sliding friction is little less than the static friction. Now there is another friction also, but we will talk about that friction later, because we have to talk about that in detail, that how is it and it is much easier than both of this friction. So here we have to just remember that static friction and sliding friction. So sliding friction is little smaller, less than the static friction. Now we talk about the friction. It looks like friction is unnecessary because it is opposing the motion and so on. But if you think properly, and then you will understand that friction is called a necessary evil. Friction is a necessary evil. It means that it is necessary also, and it is not useful also. Means it's just like the two sides of the coin. It means that in some situation friction is necessary. Without friction, some of the daily works also we will not be able to do it. And in some situation, friction is an evil. Evil means it is not useful or it is harmful for us. And that we have to learn today now. That in which situation the friction is essential, means it is our friend. First of all thing, you have observed in the beginning of the chapter that when you step over a banana skin, why do we slip? Similarly, why it is not easier to walk on very slippery marble tiles or oily floor? Because the friction is very less on the smooth surface. It means that if there is no friction, we won't be able to walk on the floor. When we walk on the floor, then either our shoes or our legs are getting friction with the floor. So we can get grip on it and we can easily walk on the floor or anywhere. It means that here friction is necessary. If there is no friction, we won't be able to walk. Second thing, when we write down in the notebook with a pen or a pencil, it is also possible because of the friction between the pen and your paper of the notebook. Try to write down on a glass with your pencil or a pen. It is not possible because friction is very less when we write down on the very smooth glass. Because of the friction, the ink can stuck on the paper. Similarly, I wrote down on this whiteboard with the marker. It is also possible only because of the friction between the tip of this marker and the surface. Similarly, we use the blackboard also. On that we write down with the chalk stick. So if it is frictionless, then think, will you be able to write down on the blackboard? No, you won't be able to write down. Because of the friction, the particles of the chalk can stick on the board and it will remain there and we can read it. So in this situation also, without friction, it won't be able to. Even I am holding this book, or you holding a glass of water, or any container, or a marker, it is because of the friction. If it is no friction, then we won't be able to hold it. Think, if there was no friction, then how will you stop a vehicle which is moving? Because of the friction between the brake pads and the wheel, when we apply the brake, the wheel can stop. If there was no friction, then it was impossible. Even we cannot move the vehicles also. Otherwise vehicles will slip on the road. Also, like in some situation, like friction helps to move, to stop, or to change the direction of the motion also. It means that friction is very, very essential. You can think about more and you can write down more examples also in which without friction it will not be able to do that such works. If there is no friction between the sharpener and the pencil, put some oil in your sharpener and try to sharpen it. Will you be able to do it? No, because it's very, very smooth, and therefore you won't be able to do that. So you will find so many examples in which you will think that, without friction, it will not be possible to do these types of activities. It means that friction is necessary. Now think the other side, that friction is an evil. Evil means our enemy. You know that you use your slippers or shoes, chappal, etc. Then after frequent use, your sole of the shoes are getting damaged, weared, and then you have to buy the new one of them. Similarly, if your tires are used so much, any vehicles, then it becomes smooth. Then either you have to remold the tire or you have to change the new tire. Otherwise there is a chances of accident. So it goes wear and tear. Similarly, in the machine also, when the moving parts are coming in contact, then there is a friction between them. And after frequent use, they are getting damaged and we have to change their parts. In the ball bearings also. So here you can see that friction is an evil that is damaging the goods like our salts, the machinery parts, ball bearings, etc. Similarly, in some situation you will see that due to friction, the heat is also produced. For example, if you rub your hand, especially we do it in winter time. So when you rub your hand like this, then feel it. It will be little warm. But in some situation when the heat is produced, that is unnecessary. For example, if you press your brakes very hard, then you will feel that sometimes when you see the vehicles going on the road, then it's hot. The tire will be very hot. Similarly, when there is a friction, when we switch on the mixer grinder, because of that friction between that thing we are grinding and the blade, it becomes hot. Here in this situation, this heat is unnecessary because that heat produced, we cannot use that heat. It means it is a waste of energy. So here you can see that friction produces heat and heat generated is a waste of energy. It means that that energy is not useful for us. Other example also, I forgot to tell you about friction is essential. I just remember. When you want to light a candle, what do you use? A matchstick. A matchstick, we have to rub it on the side which is very rough, and then because of the friction it starts burning. And you know that sometimes when it is wet or that surface is getting smoother because of the more use, you rubbing, but the matchstick does not start burning because the friction is less. So here, as I told you, that friction is our friend also, and friction is evil also. So it is known as friction is a necessary evil. In the next video, we will learn about that friction. Sometimes we do something to increase friction, and sometimes we need to decrease the friction. That we will learn in the next session. So here we are going to finish today's session, which will be followed by some question answers. And if any query, write down in the comment section. Thank you very much.